Alrighty, so this is my second go at environmental modelling. This time I'm aiming to do a bit of a cityscape. I'm just going to worry about the buildings in this thing, and here you can see sort of a finished version. So if I just flick over to a new general blend file, I need to start transforming this cube into a building. So first up, I'm going to tab into edit mode, and I'm going to grab everything in the Z direction, move it up 1 unit. This is aiming to place that little orange dot right at the bottom of the building. Then grabbing the top of the building, I'm just going to grab another, say, 4 in the Z direction. That now looks like a sort of skyscraper with about 3-4 levels, let's say. Switching out of edit mode, we're back into object mode, and I need to enable the node Wrangler for this next part. So going down to edit, preferences. In this setup I already have it enabled, but you can tick the box just here from your add-ons, and then once you've done that you can save your preferences so it remembers that you've enabled this across different uses of the program. Alright, so now I need to make sure I've got a material, so select the object, check for material, yes it's got here, if it doesn't you need to add one, and we're going to go up to the shading menu. Click the shading menu, wait a second. This gives us a flat, what they call material preview. It's not a fully rendered view, it's not a solid view or a wireframe, it just gives us the basics of what the object should look like. So we're going to use this to visually reference what we need, and then down the bottom we're going to tweak the shader setup so we can control what appears on that surface. First up we're going to search for an image texture node, and we're going to wire this into the color information into the base color of our shader. This will go black, but now we need to add said material, texture, no, image, that's the word. So going through this whole list of stuff, we're looking for a side of a building. It doesn't display accurately or correctly, but this is where we make use of the node Wrangler by hitting Control T. There may actually be other ways for the node Wrangler to do its thing through all this stuff, but honestly I just remember Control T and don't remember the details. So we're looking at the windows on the surface of this building. So I'm going to start tweaking the scale. That's the X, alright, that's going to give me some weird results, but this is going to be fun. And then Y, and you can see the building's kind of rotated 90 degrees. So if we adjust the Z 90 degrees, so it switches right angles, that's a little better, it's starting to make sense now. So here we can start grabbing it to get what we would consider to be appropriate window size. And I'm also looking to see when it's at the bottom, there's a consistent level from top to bottom. It'll be clearer once I get there. So here I've just hit the top of the windows. So if I want to position this so that it has the same thing about there, maybe that one. So when I adjust in the Y direction, it is consistent. Tweaking a little bit up, a little bit down, it's obviously sitting between those two values. So I might just go the other way. So we have positive numbers, easier to deal with. 0.3, too much. 0.2, not enough, so let's go halfway. Halfway between 0.2 and 0.3 is 0.25. That's almost right, but you can see this little bit of the bottom, and the top looks pretty good. So we need to just tweak the scaling a little bit. No other way. That might work, but we're going to have to adjust this thing. It's all out all over the shop again, so let's just start the scaling. Now when you look at the scaling, what you're aiming to grab is the same point at the very top of here also mirrors down the bottom here, so that when you adjust the position information, it looks pretty legit. 25 to 15, well, let's just go 0.2 this time, and that's almost perfect. Wow, it's kind of done better if I tried. And then we look at the scale information. How many windows across do we want it to be? Again, we're looking at that same sort of setup, so that when we grab the position information, we can see it carries quite nicely across the four faces of the building. And that's brilliant. I seem to have just lucked onto the right settings. So, that's this one. The building is pretty much done. This is building 1, so we better actually name this in the outliner up here. Oops, that's it. Building 1. Done. Alright, we have our first building. It's great. So, we need to also tidy up the fact that we don't want all those faces at the very top of our building. So, for this case, I will switch to edit mode, and we're going to deal with materials. So the first material is the building side. So I'm just going to call it mat_sides. There, done. Actually, it's singular, just one side for a building. Now we need to add a new material. So I'm just going to add new material. I'm going to call it mat top. I know, I'm very inventive with my names. We're going to make the top of the building be black so that nobody ever notices it, or even just as like a dark grey. And because I've gone into edit mode and I've selected the very top of my building, I can now assign that material to the top. I mean, if I felt fancy, I could even take something like this. So select the material, do the grey, go cheat, use the eyedropper and go click. It matches. And then switch out of edit mode into object mode, and it matches kind of dubiously, but that's not too bad. We might be able to tweak it. No, too far. So we'll go back into edit mode, and we'll just use the eyedropper again, finding a darker patch. I'm not happy with that, so try for a third time, and that will do, because now I've just gone, yeah, that'll do. So we have a pretty reasonable looking building. We go back to our layout, and we still can't see it, but let's go to the rendered view, and we have a building for a city. Now we need to do a variant building, so we're going to do another one. So Shift D to duplicate said object, hold down Control so that when I move it, it matches the grid. And that way, I know it's locked to the grid. Anyhow, this is my variant building. For this one, I'm going to duplicate the side and the top. Excuse me. And go back to the shading menu. So this is building 1.001. We're going to call this building 2.001 so that I know it's a different building. That's that done. And I'm going to focus on that different building, and I'm going to select a different texture. Luckily I happen to have a second texture here, which is the industrial scape, and of course it's out of sync, so we need to then retweak the mapping values. So looking nicely from the side here, you can see this is 7 stories. We want to kind of get this to match that, so it's roughly about the same, unless of course we want to drop the height of the building. Shock horror. So switching into edit mode, I'm going to drop the building and I'm going to grab in the Z direction, and it's going to squish things a little bit, and that will do. Alright, so it's a little more squished, so we're going to have to adjust everything. So going into our scaling, we're going to scale up. Now this looks like it should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stories, so I need to get 6 faces on here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 6.5, so we'll just push a little further. Come on. So again, same rule of thumb, that the top of one face looks like it should connect to the bottom of the other. This is the great thing about having seamless textures. That's roughly right, and if I just, no, not that one. Actually, maybe the setting will just do. And then we look at the position information. Now obviously that's not reaching all the way across, so we'll get this and expand it a little. Maybe just a tad more. No, wrong one. That looks pretty good. Rotate around the building. That makes each of the faces face inappropriately. That's good. And that looks pretty good for what I wanted to map. Switching over to material top 001, which is the, whoops. Okay. Select the appropriate material here in the properties, and now we can adjust the top color, which is going to be sort of that industrial grey. So you can either select it down here and use the eyedropper here to select appropriate colour, or in here, depending on what you've got enabled on your screen. So this then sets up the two buildings. I'm then going to just go back to layout, and I can then switch out of edit mode into object mode and start dealing with the layout of these buildings. Looking directly from above, I'm going to select both buildings. I'm going to Shift D to duplicate and then reposition them. Shift D, and then grab that one, duplicate. So what I'm really trying to do, holding each time I move these, I'm actually holding down Control, is to create a somewhat random city scene. You can see here I'm getting that sort of thing. The lighting is particularly hopeless, but I'll talk about lighting in just a second. But I'm making sure the buildings are sort of different heights and different scales. They're kind of flat and not super exciting, but we'll get to adding more details to things like this down the track. But I would like you to create 3 different buildings, actually probably 5 different buildings, so you can fill your thing, have them different heights and that sort of thing, so things don't look uniform. So as a backdrop, it kind of adds some visual interest. In terms of lighting for this sort of scene, you've got a couple of choices at this point. Oh yeah, I should also add a ground plane. So Shift A, plane, scale, let's go 50. There are a couple of different lighting setups. So I've got my ground. You can fancify the ground down the track, but lighting, I keep getting distracted for some reason. So the first one is you can take the lights, and if I just grab that and drop it here, you can create the equivalent of street lighting, which, you know, somewhat exciting. You have to then go through and create a lot of lights on this thing, but that's really good for something like a night scene. The second, of course, is a daylight scene. If we go sun, this is way too overblown. For some reason, point light, 1000 watts, that's good. Spotlight, 1000 watts. Area light, 1000 watts. Sunlight, nuclear apocalypse level. It needs to be dropped down to something like 10. And then this light operates different to the others. So a point light is a single point in space and it goes out light in all directions. A spotlight is a light that points in one particular direction and illuminates a chunk of scene. Great for, you know, street lamps and that sort of stuff. Area light is more of like a bunch of lights in an area illuminating things. So you might think fluorescent tubes in the roof and that sort of stuff. Sunlight is much like the sun travelling, or the light from the sun travelling and hitting the earth. All the light is in the same direction. So if I grab this and look from above, all it's going to do is tell me, as I rotate it, which direction all the light is travelling. So you can see all the buildings roughly have that same effect. And if I then rotate it up, you get long shadows, midday, that sort of stuff. By changing the colour, if you go for the yellows, you've got a forest fire kind of burnt day. You get the hues of sunsets. You can get some fairly odd results, neon lights and that sort of stuff, or whatever. But the goal here is to create sort of an interesting city backdrop. I'm not going to bother touching the ground effects and do that sort of stuff. We'll get to that down the track. But this is building a basic scene for a city. What I'd like you to do is create 5 different buildings and fill it out. Thank you. And good luck with it.